Welcome, Big Blue World. This is Britt Boles, and this is another episode of Blue Biographies. Today we have not just one, but two special guests. Welcome to Ashley and Susan. Hi, Ashley and Susan.
Hello, hello.
It's so wonderful to have you here in the group chatting with us today. For anyone who's new to the series, Blue Biographies started as a way to get to know farmers and artisans and gardeners around the world, to hear their stories and experiences with growing indigo-bearing plants. So we're excited to hear your stories today. Ashley and Susan, would you just take a moment to introduce yourselves, tell us where you are, and what indigo-bearing plants you're working with?
Okay, so yes, so I'm Ashley, and we are located in Hertfordshire, North Hertfordshire in the UK.
Which is halfway between Cambridge and London, so it's in the southeast corner, really, of England.
Yeah. So about 30 miles north of London. We grow. At the moment, I'm growing 4 varieties of Japanese indigo, and also European woad, plus Chinese woad, and I've got some Isatis glauca growing as well, which is a perennial kind of woad from Turkey. I think that I have tried growing indigofera. In last year, I managed to get a plant about so big.
Yeah.
but that's as far as it got before it keeled over and died.
Okay.
When the cold weather came.
So I'm Susan, and I'm Ashley's other half. We've been living together for about 30 years. We currently now seem to be interested in collecting as many different plants as we can grow in our climate, and so the list, Ashley's always hopeful that we'll find something that will grow really well, but really the woad and the Japanese indigo are our main plants. I'm the kind of assistant gardener. Ashley's the lead gardener. I kind of was brought in mainly to do the textile side of things when Ashley had started growing plants. So we're a quite helpful team because we have quite different interests, and I'll probably interrupt Ashley quite a lot because I'm the really noisy, gabby one, and Ashley's very quiet and considered. So I'll just say that now. If you see our dynamics, our family dynamics played out all this evening.
Excellent. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for introducing yourselves. And it's really wonderful, I have to say personally, to meet you again in this world, in the world of Zoom, but just to see your faces and hear your voices, it's really meaningful. You've shared so much with this group from the very start of the group. So I'm so appreciative and glad to meet you. And I'm also really curious just to hear more about the garden dynamics. But before we get into some nitty-gritties of plants, and I'm really curious, especially about the different types of woads, as it's not a plant that I can safely grow here. But I'd love to know just about, if you will, your backgrounds and how you came to textiles. How did you come to natural dyes? Was there any influence in your families or your studies in school? And how did you kind of collectively meet as a duo to join in on this project of natural dyes?
I'm going to jump in first because Ashley has a very funny story, which does go back to his school days. But I've got this amusing surname. So my surname is Dye.
It's wonderful. I wondered about that.
So some people think I've changed my name
Okay.
or whatever. But no, I was born with that name. And where I come from originally is Norwich, which is in Norfolk in the east of the country, very flat area. But the city I come from was very famous for dyeing, particularly the Madder Reds, but it was a very important textile city. Yeah, Madder Reds.
Oh,
it was an important textile city from the medieval era. And so it's quite a common name in the city. And and you also find it in Scotland, but it doesn't have an R on the end. Interestingly, most people have an R on the end. So I used to hate my name because every time I had to tell somebody my name, I had to make them spell it the right way and say it's Susan Dye, D-Y-E,
Okay.
not D-I-E for deceased. And I didn't like the name at all, but life went on. I met Ashley. I don't know whether he was interested in me because of my name. I don't know. You'll find out. But when I did get into dyeing, it felt like I'd arrived and I didn't need to think about that anymore ever again.
Oh, wonderful.
But my mother loved textiles and color. So we were surrounded by fabric. She was always buying fabric to make clothes or upholstery. She adored color, and she could carry color in her mind, and match it perfectly without taking a sample. So as a child, color was one of the things we shared and loved and enjoyed, as well as plants. So I think that definitely has surfaced as I've got more involved in this.
Fantastic. And was that her surname as well, or was?
No, actually, no, it was my father's name. And we've done a bit of family research, but we still can't find, my sister's done quite a lot. She can't find any evidence that anywhere back to the sort of 18th century, there's any dyers.
Okay.
So, we haven't discovered anything.
They may have come from Scotland, though.
They may have come from Scotland. I mean, there was it's another story, but there's a lot of herring that was fished all the way down the east coast of England up to Scotland, and so the Scottish name may well have come down with some of the herring fishermen, but we don't know.
Okay, excellent. Oh, I love that. I have always wondered if that was a chosen name or a given name. I love that it's like a coming of age story. It's like a coming into yourself story, into your name. Really beautiful. So Ashley, how about you? What's your history and background with textiles?
My mum used to be well into all kinds of textiles, lace making in particular, knitting. I mean, her family going way back have always knitted stuff, and so there was always something going on in the house, always something being made. She wasn't so good at making clothes out of cloth, it was knitting was the thing, and lace making. Anyway, so it's the story I have, I've told it before a few times to other people, but the story I have is relevant, is kind of relevant because to how we got into it. And what happened was, when I was at school, this is infant school, so I was probably no more than about 7 or 8, something like that. And we were shown a textbook about the ancient history about cavemen, and in there was a picture, there was an illustration of a bunch of cavemen.
Dwellers, no women.
Yeah, no, I think there was some women in there as well. but they were mixing up a load of red berries to make some kind of paint, so that they could paint the cave walls. And I couldn't read at the time. I was hopeless. I was a very late developer, I couldn't read. So I always paid particular attention to the pictures. That was my thing. So I thought, hey, that's great. That's fantastic. Making your own color, it's great. And I went home and I picked a load of berries off one of the bushes in the garden, red berries. And I thought, I'm going to make my own pigment. I'm going to make my own stuff. And so I did. I mixed it all up. I mashed them all up. And what I got was this green slime. I was really annoyed. I thought, this book's lying. They're not telling the truth. This is not right. And I gave up. I gave up at that point and didn't do any more. but then later on, much later on, when we got an allotment and we're growing vegetables and stuff, somewhere that memory came back of that, and I thought, well, I know what I'm doing now. I can grow something that's really going to work. So I picked out the three classic plants: weld, woad, and madder, and tried to get hold of them. And the first one I got hold of was woad, and I started growing that straight away. So yes, and it's all really gone on from then, really.
But I think what happened in between Ashley being a 6-year-old at school and having an allotment with me is he trained in graphic design and illustration, and he was working in commercial art. So we've always been surrounded by, and you've never stopped sort of designing things and making things. So the idea that we could actually use our own pigment in something was just a tremendous goal, really.
Yes, I know. As a graphic designer, I used to regard paint as a tool, nothing more than that. It was just a tool to achieve what I wanted to achieve. And then suddenly that wasn't enough, and I had to try and make my own. Incidentally, I haven't got as far as making my own pigment yet. Not really.
You haven't made paint?
I haven't made paint. No, I've made some pigment, but not. I haven't made any paint yet. So that's next.
Excellent. Oh, that's wonderful. I can relate. Actually, I have a really similar childhood. I'm in a fort mashing berries with probably a rusty spoon, and I'm picking apples off of the tree and eating them, and I'm stained all over. And there's something really powerful about those childhood experiences and how they resurface again later. I'm glad you didn't give up entirely and you gave it another go. Yeah, that's wonderful to hear. And to start with the three classics, or the woad, madder, and weld, I'm also curious at the time, how easy was it to access those seeds or plants? Who around you was cultivating or utilizing those plants in a way that was accessible to you?
Well, there was nobody around here.
Well, not that we knew. Actually,
yes.
we didn't.
Sure, okay.
We didn't know the people around here, but there are a few specialist plant nurseries that very good company. Chiltern Seeds, I think, was one of them, wasn't it? And Suffolk Herbs,
which no longer exists.
Yeah. So there were some specialists, and we of course were getting their catalogues for the vegetable garden anyway.
Okay.
And these were small herb producers, or seed producers. So the catalogues were made with love. They were absolutely beautiful pieces of artwork. Those catalogues with the photography and the. So I think you got some of them from there.
Yeah, I did. I got nearly all. I think the only difficult one to get hold of was madder seed. And in the end, I can't remember who I got it from, but I got a whole packet of madder seeds, planted them, and one came up. And all the madder, virtually all the madder we have in our allotment is all from that one single seed.
Wow.
Yes.
And it is a very generous plant, so I'm sure you have lots of madder now, more than you can ever want.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm curious to know from both of you, just how did it proceed? Were you starting off dyeing fibers or wool? Were you getting it? Were there any local fibers available? Any local sheep, woolen mills, or was there flax? What's the history around your local fibers?
And you can carry on. Okay, so this is a really interesting story as well, and I think it relates to the fact that we decided already to downshift from our mainstream jobs. So I worked in sort of financial services and software, and Ashley worked in graphic design and industry. And we'd already decided, I think, that it was all crazy. It was about 2000. It was the turn of the millennium, and I downshifted and got out and started a 4-day-a-week job in the voluntary sector in environmental campaigning. So that was the beginning of a change, and we started joining local environmental groups, and we met people, and I kept saying to Ashley, you've got to get out of your job, you've got to downshift as well, you know, we'll be all right, you can do it. But it's always harder for, I think, for the bloke to do it for the man, because he's the man, you know. Anyway, eventually through the environmental network of people we were linked with, I met a woman who was running a horticultural therapy project. And she needed somebody to be a horticultural care worker, so looking after people while doing gardening. And you took redundancy, you got an opportunity to leave, and you took that job, and everything changed. And we were in a network then of really interesting alternative people. And Ashley's manager, Anne, was working for, she was working in this project, but she was also taking an organic horticulture qualification. In her study group were a couple who had a flock of sheep by the coast in Suffolk, of ancient Norfolk horn sheep. And these are a really rare breed, fantastic for producing the broadcloth, the woolen broadcloth that was so financially valuable for the whole of the southeast of England. And Ashley came home from work one day and simply gave me a fresh sheep's fleece of one of these Norfolk horns. It was a shearling fleece. It was absolutely, at the time, I'd never touched a fleece in my life. Here was this smelly, beautiful lump of stuff. And he said, can you go and find out what you do with that? Because my madder is going to be ready to die with quite soon. And I swear he didn't tell me he'd planted it. I don't know, this one seed. Anyway, it was a bit of a surprise to me. But the moment I got my hands on the sheep's fleece, I fell in love. It was in the summer holiday. I phoned the local Spinners and Weavers and Dyers Guild, which we've got this lovely network of guilds across the UK and beyond a little bit. And I immediately got through to a wonderful person called May in the local guild, which we didn't know existed, just in the next town from us. She said, sit down, get a pencil and paper. I will tell you everything you need to know.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And from that point on, we were off. And then we did discover we'd got local farms we could get fleece from. We were in the network of people who always got, you know, fibre to share, but it was mostly wool. We definitely started with wool, didn't we? Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
And we haven't, I mean, I suppose in terms of local dye producers, the closest we got to meeting somebody who was actually running a business was Ian in Norfolk, Ian Howard.
Ian Howard, okay,
so,
yeah.
I don't think he's got the farm anymore, but he's been so influential in the development of indigo dyeing in the UK and so generous with his knowledge. And we did manage, because my family are up in Norfolk, we did manage to go and visit him and do a workshop with him. We've got his book, and he's an amazing character.
He's a character. He's a character.
You can get him on Blue Biographies if you can use soon.
Oh, that'd be fantastic. Yeah. I've seen, I haven't read the book, but I've seen it, you know, posted around a bit. Mostly, I don't know if I haven't bought it out of jealousy because I can't be woad or not, but
true. Yeah.
But the title of the book is, do you have one there?
Yeah, I have. I've got it right here. Whoops, just dropped one about. It's called Field to Fashion.
Yes. Okay.
And I believe it's available on, if not eBay, Etsy. So he self-published it.
Okay.
It's full of mistakes.
Well, bless him. No, it's his story. It is absolutely his story, and it's so authentically. You know, he made the woad balls, and it's the only example really of somebody doing field scale work on woad in the UK. So it's really precious knowledge, and he's a very special man.
Looks fantastic.
Yeah.
Definitely, we can post a link too as well. And I know you have it in your resources PDF, I think, as well.
He got involved in the Spindigo project.
Right. Tell me more about that. Yeah, I've heard the name.
Well, that I mean, it was slightly before our time, but the Spindigo project was an attempt to try and find a way of bringing the production of indigo from woad back, and make it commercial again. find a modern method of extracting the indigo that was not going to cost an arm and a leg. And they succeeded quite well. But it still couldn't produce it, and could not produce it as cheaply as you can buy it, from
Sure.
other countries. So, but anyway, he had a go. And he's an incredible character for doing that, and to try and make it commercial. And he did succeed, but he's definitely a man before his time. He
I put a link in the chat to the Etsy
Perfect.
page. Yeah.
Yeah, I just shared it onto the Facebook group as well. Thank you for
Great.
that. So I'm interested, is there any wild woad as well in any of the regions close to you, or
Not close to
No.
us, but I do believe that there is still some woad wild in the southwest, because there was a lot of woad growing down. I think that in some parts of the southwest of England there might be some wild, but nothing that you could forage.
It's extremely rare. It's
Interesting.
extremely rare in the wild. It just doesn't. It can't compete in our British conditions. A woad, it likes dry scrubland. It does not like damp British Isles.
Okay. Yeah.
So even if you sow it out,
we put some in the forest garden.
if you guerrilla sow it out in the wild,
it won't take over.
It'll grow for a little while, but eventually it'll just die out.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. We have a little bit of wild woad down in southern Oregon where I live, and quite a bit in California, which is why it's on our invasive list
No
here.
problem.
I always like to just put that out periodically into the world, that it has, if under the right conditions, if it's dry enough, it is a pretty voracious plant, and thousands of seeds, or is it hundreds of seeds per plant, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, quite prolific. So somebody is talking about that wonderful backdrop behind you, but I'm curious, before we start talking about it, would you tell us, you're not just growing indigo, so we want to know what else is growing in your garden too, and maybe you could walk us through the tapestry behind you.
Okay. Well, we try to concentrate on the plants that give the most light fast colors. So that's why we're particularly interested in the indigo bearing plants, plus madder and weld. But since we started, we thought, well, there must be more plants than this. There must be more native plants that we can grow.
Sure.
So we've searched around a lot, and I've been trying to grow things like hedge bedstraw and wild madder. That's Rubria peregrina, and also Dyer's woodruff.
Aspirula tinctoria.
They're all members of the same family, all members of the Rubriaceae. And they were all used in the past as dye plants, but their use just fell away. As soon as madder came along with its big fat roots, they thought, wow, this is the stuff, well, never mind all that other rubbish. and as a result, all the knowledge about these other plants is just gone. So we thought we'd try and bring some of it back, and some of the plants, particularly Dyer's woodruff, just gives a fantastic red. Fantastic red. Really
and the ladies' bedstraw as well. So there's the bedstraws. I know that there's more than just the Aspirula tinctoria. There are relatives of that, like the galliums, and we could only get hold of the Dyer's woodruff, Aspirula tinctoria, but it's one of my favorite dye plants. It's got such a pretty habit. It's a really delicate fern-like leaf and little white flowers. It's so cheerful and pretty and slow growing. It's like madder, and it's much smaller, so for a small garden You wouldn't get quantity of it, but it's a very pleasing plant. And I think as the more we've done the dye gardening, and we have a very small garden, it's people are surprised and think we've got a farm, but it's very small. There's a lot packed in. But we've kind of, I guess it happens with all gardening, unless you're a farmer with a huge pressure to get a big yield, and it's a big commercial operation. Ours is more a demonstration garden. The garden's become this lovely blend of aesthetics, wildlife value, and the dye yield.
Right.
And we get as much joy from each of those things now. So there's a lot of space in the garden for things that are good color but not high volume, not very big volume. And we also grow Dyer's broom, which is almost as good as Weld, and that's a very pretty yellow flower, nice habit. And we grow sawwort, which Michel Garcia did a lot to promote. We're not sure we've got exactly the same plant as him, because ours is very small and his on video looks really big. So we're still hunting to see what else we could grow.
I'm sure that the plant he's growing is not our
native sawwort, but it's another very, very pretty plant. It's a fantastic plant for bees. So, and it has purple flowers. I don't know about you, but it seems like almost all the dye plants have yellow flowers.
Right. Yeah.
Yellow, orange, maybe if you're really lucky with dahlias red or coreopsis red, but it's all in that bit of the spectrum. So we've always been looking for things that stretch that, and the sawwort is purple, so that's very nice. There's a bit of a
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because there is such a at least for me, when I first got into growing my own color, there was a big overwhelming desire to get the most, grow the most, get the most, really harvest heavy was my kind of modus operandi. And I really have scaled back from that. And I'm curious to hear about how your, view of the garden has shifted. And it's wonderful to hear, it's really expanded into this holistic view, which really is more about what we want, or less about what we want, and more about what's good, for the environment, the wildlife, as you said, the birds, the bees, and scale also too. Was there, ever kind of an influx of getting to the point where you wanted to grow more, or maybe you thought, more isn't actually more?
You can talk about the big allotment, can't you?
We have two allotments, one of which is only half. That the main one for the dye plants is only a half size one, so it's very small. The other one is reasonably big, and little by little they are being converted to being 100% dye plant gardens. They started off as vegetable gardens, and slowly, bit by bit, I keep running out of space, you see, so I need more. It's not, I just collect, you see, I've got a terrible I like to collect dye plants. And the more different ones I can get hold of, the happier I am.
There's maybe I should explain for American audiences. I don't know if you have something similar, but allotments are owned by the local authority, the council here, local government, and you can apply to rent one. And if you keep it well tended and it doesn't go wild, you can generally just keep it for as long as you want. But here in the southeast of England, there's a huge demand. There's been a fantastic increase in interest in food production, domestic food production. So there's a lot of people waiting to get a bit of land. And because we've already got 1.5, I don't think we will ever find another allotment through that route. But I think we're always open to trying to find other patches of land locally. And people are doing creative things, trying to team people up with people with big back gardens who haven't got the health or the time to garden them. So that's a possibility. Our own garden is tiny. We live in the middle of town and have a very small yard. And English standards of small is much, much smaller than American standards of small, of course. So if we have a little patio and it's nice to sit on a sunny day around a table and have a meal outside, well, that happens very rarely now. because the patio is covered in small plants. And it's a real treat if there's a moment when we've sold a lot of plants or they've all been planted and Ashley hasn't started any new ones. But I don't mind that at all. It's wonderful. And we did do a big teaching course last summer. So the big allotment, as we call it, which used to be fruit, soft fruit and vegetables, I think grew 2 rows of beans last year, didn't it? That was it.
Yeah.
Because it was all dye plants apart from that,
Okay.
really.
Yeah.
We took a big crop of them to this 1-week residential teaching course, which was fun. That was definitely pushing our scale. We were at peak production last summer.
That was really pushing the boat out. That was, yeah.
Yeah. And with dye plants, it's I feel like it's such an interesting balance of, well, there's some that you don't harvest for years, right? Like the madder. And then there's some like the coreopsis and indigo, Japanese indigo, that you're constantly harvesting. And you can almost, it seems like, never keep up with some of the flowers, right?
Yes, yeah.
So are there any other local dyers or artisans now that ever come and help out with harvest?
Yeah, actually, yes. We had a madder dig just before COVID, didn't we, where we invited some friends to come and dig madder with us, which was really helpful because we needed to clear some of the land. Actually, it had been left for a long time. We needed some space, which we then used for dyes Japanese indigo the following year. And that was fun, just getting a whole gang of us down and digging together. That was really good. That was in the cold of February in 2020. And then this year, well, last year, when we had harvested for the Japanese indigo for the course, we then had a very large amount that was going to continue growing because the course was in August and we had a mild autumn. So I did almost get on the phone and ring round other people and say, would you like to just come and take a crop off it?
Yeah.
I was very close to doing that. But in the end, we decided to leave it to all go to seed because we couldn't have died with all of it, could we?
No.
We extracted some.
Yeah.
But we got a great seed crop from it.
That's wonderful. I'm glad. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's always in the UK where we are, it's always a big gamble getting seed off Japanese indigo. Our season's short, and I don't know about you, but you have to really.
Some years you don't get anything at all.
Some years, that's early frosts will snap, and it's just not even gone to flower yet sometimes. So it is. It's a bit of a dice roll. So I'm glad that you were able to get seeds, and you became a hub for seeds, and you still are. How did that come about?
Well, I because I collected the seeds, saved the seeds myself, so much. We ended up with surplus quantities and started selling the surplus, and then it kind of ballooned from there.
But we have to credit our friends Brian and Richard in Devon. So we had 2 great friends who used to live very close to us, just up the road, and they moved to Devon, which is in the southwest of the country. So they moved down to the really chilled out, relaxed southwest, not the hectic, tense, stressed southeast. And they had a big dye garden in an allotment here when they lived here, and then they've re-established a new one down in Devon. And I give a plug for Brian. He's got a website called Badger Crafts, and he sells dye plants. And we do the seeds, he does the plants. So I could put that in the chat. So Brian loves talking to people at public events. So he's done a lot of fairs and shows, and he does a lot of public education, really. And so he loves having a stall with stuff to sell, so he's selling plant dyed fleece and a few plants. And he was the one really who encouraged us. And he was the first person to sell our seeds in person at these events. And at the time, it was just in a little plastic bag and not really branded or marketed at all. And there was so much demand. People were really, really keen. But the feedback was, come on, do more of this. And it took off from there.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that generally speaking, while we've been once we started growing the dye plants and continued, year after year, that it's been extremely hard for our fellow allotmenteers to actually accept what we're doing, and even now I go down there to the allotment and I'll get these comments like, oh, so you're growing them weeds again.
Oh, interesting.
No.
They do.
They're a bit puzzled about why we do so much digging for the madder.
Yeah.
So when we had our big dig in 2020, apparently we became known as the madder miners. We were digging for something like mining the ground. So have you been down that madder mine again? They sometimes ask us. They're fine. They're absolutely lovely. They're absolutely fine. Yeah.
Yeah, that is interesting though. I'm glad you mentioned, because in community garden spaces and allotments here in the US, they call them community gardens, and it's a similar concept where you're growing in community with others. Others can see what you're up to.
Yeah.
And so it's always interesting to know, the community's response. Has anyone taken any interest in trying them out? And
yeah, we've got a lovely relationship with what we call a community garden here. It tends to be more of a project that has a bit more structure than just our allotments.
mm-hmm.
But we do have a community garden called the Triangle Community Garden right next door to us, and they're brilliant. We use their facilities for teaching, and we've done a little collaboration with them.
Yeah.
And we've promised to do more with people locally. But interestingly, there is somebody else on the allotment who spins, and she grows dahlias for her plant dyes. The local guild is great. They're probably a radius of 10 miles maybe of where we live. We've got a community where when we first started, certainly we were sharing lots of resources, and I joined the London Guild, which is a half an hour away by train, because they have an excellent speaker program, and they persuaded me to give talks. So I got gradually persuaded. It's amazing. People have sort of dragged us into these activities. It isn't we sat down and thought, hey, we really would like to do this, 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 and this. It's more other people have said, come on, do this for us. And the London Guild, we'd regularly take seeds down there, swap plants, take cuttings. I mean, gardeners anyway share everything, don't they? So it's a kind of common thing to do. But in terms of, we probably, the internet, the website, Ashley's blog, writing so much about horticulture, we've always felt we've had a big global family, much bigger than our local, and we now realize we want to redress that balance and do more locally. So we have a friend who has a flock of Jacob's sheep, and she sells that in the shop in Hitchin as spun as yarn, and we're going to try and do a collaboration with her local yarn with our local dyes.
That'll be wonderful. I'm excited to follow that. So will you talk me through that tapestry behind you?
Right.
And tell me a little bit about how many plants are represented there, and how did you start this, or why did you start the project?
Well, I don't know. Several years ago, it was a thing. It was a thing to use pin looms, So we basically it was something that was within my capability to do. I'm no good at knitting. I'm really no good at knitting. This jumper here had to be. I started it, and I got past the hem of one side,
the rib,
and that's it. I couldn't do any more.
Then Susan took over, and I managed to do another chunk, but the neck and the sleeves were not going well. So we have a wonderful friend called Tracy. Thank you, Tracy. Who took it on and knitted it for us. But the pin loom. Do people know what these things are? The pin looms. It's a wooden.
Them? Yeah, would you?
It's a wooden frame. This one's quite a thin one that Ashley's made, and it's got a square of little nails, very small nails, quite close together. There's a few clever tweaks about how they're positioned, and it allows you to effectively darn a piece of cloth. You wrap, you measure a long piece of thread, and you wrap it around the pins in 3 directions. And then the last bit of thread that you're left with, which is quite long, you use a big-eyed darning needle, and you darn it all together. And it makes a fabric, which is, this one's got some visual texture in it,
Oh,
but
yeah,
it makes
yeah.
quite a strong, well, with the spinning that you've done, it
Mm.
makes quite a strong kind of nice cloth. So that's what this was, 144.
Yes, 12 by 12, 144 squares. Yes, and
Wow.
it's taken me about 6 years,
Wow.
or maybe longer. I don't know, to do.
Yeah.
And so in this blanket, because that's what it is, a blanket. In there, it is represented whatever fleece we could get a hold of at the time.
It's a lot of Shetland.
All dyed with whatever natural dyes we had at the time as well. So it's a huge variety of stuff. Let's see. Yeah, the camera doesn't really do it justice. In these light conditions.
Right. Yeah. The lighting is always
Speak
tricky.
close to the
Say
camera.
so. Yeah, this is actually orange. This is actually a really bright orange.
Okay.
Orange. And that's dahlia. That's dahlia.
Beautiful. With
Yeah.
any modifications or just dahlia?
No, Alan Mordented wool and dahlia.
Mhm.
It's not a hugely light fast dye, but if you don't, if you don't put it out in the sun, it'll keep for years and years without any problem. Then we've got this is pink. This is just madder pink.
Okay.
And madder red in the bottom corner. So that's,
oh, yes. Yeah, I can see that bright red.
Yeah. And then the greens, all the greens.
Do you want to speak closely to the camera?
Yeah. The greens are just probably, I'm not absolutely certain, but most of them are weld over dyed with indigo.
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah. And then there's over on the other side there are lots of yellows, mostly weld, but the more orangey ones are either dahlia or coreopsis.
Okay. Mhm.
Some dyes chamomile in there as well.
Yes. Yeah. Actually, yes. There'll be dyes. I've lost track of which is which.
Sure.
I'm afraid. And there's some dark red ones. They're really dark red, and I cheated. I used cochineal for them.
But the only we swapped it. We had a friend in Scandinavia who wanted some seeds.
That's right. Yes.
So we sent her loads of seeds, and she visited the Gran Canaria cochineal production.
Oh, wow.
And so she said, I'll return you some cochineal. So it was a trade for indigo and woad seeds.
Yeah. And there are of the blues, most of them are probably Japanese indigo from Japan, but quite a few of them are from woad as well. And there's one or two pinks. Let's see.
Mhm.
That one, yeah. That one is indigo-bearing pink.
Fantastic. Yeah.
From woad, yes.
There's an indigo-bearing purple as well. Where you get the blue and the pink over dyeing. Careful with it, it might fall over.
Oh
Yeah,
so
so-
right there, yeah.
So the color on the screen here doesn't look quite like it is.
Right.
Anyway, yeah. So there's some greys which we have a long story about trying to find. We grow this plant called elecampane, which is for the bees, and it's really beautiful. It's Helenium. It's tall. Well, the variety we've got is very tall, stately, and I love it. Takes up a lot of space. It may get chopped out of the dye garden. I actually found a recipe.
Yes, it's in a Scottish dye recipe book, and one of these fabled recipes for getting blue. We got quite obsessed with blues, or at least maybe I did initially, and I thought, well, there's all these other recipes, for blues, which don't involve indigo.
Right.
What are these all about? And anyway, one of them involved elecampane root.
Okay.
I followed it I followed the recipe as far as I possibly could, and ended up with a grey.
Very nice
It's a
grey.
very nice grey. Yeah, it's a
But
very nice grey.
there's quite a lot of people think there's a linguistic, there's something lost in translation from the Gaelic, and that the word for blue, there are many different, there's sort of glass and there's another word, and that probably it means a bluey grey or a soft colour. So it was a very valuable grey. It's a nice grey in the cloth.
It's unusual. It's a neutral grey. It's neither warm nor cold. It's somewhere in the middle. And that's different to a lot of the greys you can get.
Right.
With
iron on yellow.
It's the tannin.
And there's a few squares in here which are a very deep, rich brown. I mean, an amazingly deep, rich brown. And that was following a recipe with weld and iron, but you added something to.
I used a recipe from
was it Jim Lyle's?
Jim Lyle, Jim Lyle's book.
Yeah.
Very good book, extremely good. And he recommended using oxalic acid in conjunction with iron. So oxalic acid plus iron. And basically what it does is it allows more iron to be properly dissolved in the solution. And more of the iron gets absorbed into the wool. So
we were expecting a sort of a green.
We were expecting a sort of a nice maybe nice chocolatey brown or something nice and soft, But it came out virtually black.
It's an amazing colour.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But oxalic acid isn't very nice stuff, but we happen to have it because Ashley's a beekeeper and it is used in a particular procedure in beekeeping. So I think the fact that we have a lot of things hanging around because of the beekeeping, and it meant it was easy for us to just give it a go.
I was just going to ask, where did you use it in its powdered or crystalline form, or I'm curious about rhubarb or other plants that are high in oxalic acid, if those would work.
Yeah, no, as I say, because I'm a beekeeper, I happen to have some oxalic acid
in crystal
form, which we use it to treat the bees for varroa mite,
a parasite.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's very volatile and evaporates completely eventually quite quickly. So it's a quick acting thing that doesn't leave a big trace or anything like that. It's a very small molecule. But we haven't tried it with oxalic acid bearing plants, but it might be even better because you wouldn't end up with such a ridiculously strong effect.
You can use, basically it cuts down the amount of iron you need to use it drastically. You don't need to use anything like as much if you use a little bit of oxalic acid with it.
But it is
and
poisonous.
That could be really beneficial to fibers like wool, right? Especially.
It could be, but it is toxic. So we're not recommending people go out and try this at home.
I'm thinking more about all the rhubarb, leaves.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
There's always a surplus of those in the garden, it seems.
Definitely.
Well, interesting. Oh, that's fantastic. I'm wondering, do you have a picture on the internet somewhere, or is it on your website of this?
We're just waiting. We have a friend who's an expert in photographing quilts, and we're on her list for a bright sunny day to take a really good picture of it, because we could put one up. Is there one on the blog? No, you haven't done a blog post of this.
We've done one or two, but none of them are complete. They're
okay.
I only recently finished it. That's the thing.
Okay.
So
and I love the tassels as well around the edge with all different colors.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Well, please share it in the group when you have a photo. We'd love to admire it. And I know it's so tricky to photograph all colors, especially when they're all together. So it's always it's the dyer's challenge. Like, I promise it's this color. It's like the fish stories of dyers, right?
Yes.
This big, I swear. Fantastic. This is so interesting. There's so many different directions that I feel like we could go as far as our chat, but I'd love to know too just a little bit more about you always have such, great advice on your website as far as, the different plants go and your experiences with them. I'm just curious, which ones, I'm sure there might have been some, maybe you've posted about it, which ones didn't work well for you, or were there any?
Oh yeah.
And in your collection of curating these different plants, like I think of you as almost like a plant museum. You're collecting all of these different species. Have you landed on any favorites, or is it really more seasonal obsessions? I go through seasonal obsessions with different plants myself.
Well, I'll start with the plants. The plant, I said the plant that didn't work out.
Oh yes,
okay.
Great story. That's a great story. I know exactly what this will be.
This is Alcana tinctoria, Dyer's alkanet.
Oh, okay.
And I've been trying to, I still haven't managed to get hold of any proper stuff, but I was trying to get hold of this for years. I still haven't got hold of the plant.
It gives purple from the root.
Yes, it's related to Murasaki, the Japanese
Right.
plant, to produce this lovely purple. And but the Dyer's alkanet was used, way back in history, and it was used a lot. It was used everywhere. There's, you look in these ancient papyri recipes, dye recipes. It's always in there somewhere, and it's a Mediterranean plant. It's a member of the Boraginaceae, just the same as Murasaki, but it's quite low. It's quite low growing, and it's very hairy. It's a very hairy plant. Anyway, I bought some seed, which was advertised as Dyer's,
Alcana tinctoria.
Alcana tinctoria.
From a reputable supplier.
A reputable supplier, yeah. And I grew it for 3 years. Oh, this is good. It's good. It's growing really well.
It was pretty, nice rosette. And then we got flowers. The flowers were gorgeous. They were really beautiful, yes. Deep blue flowers.
Yeah. And then when I dug it up, the roots were white, because you get the dye from the root. The roots were bright white. There wasn't a trace of color in them at all. So I was most disappointed. Yeah. I was really disappointed, and I was so disappointed. I wrote to the politely
and constructively
to the seed salesman, say, yeah. I don't think this is the right plant, and they subsequently took it off their catalogue.
Under that heading.
Yeah.
But were you able to ID it? Was it in fact that?
It was probably a kind of common alkanet. And unfortunately, there are
many.
There's tens and tens of different species of alkanet.
Yeah.
And which one it was exactly, I never really found out.
We had a nice bed of it. We had about 8-9 plants, all beautifully arranged. The bees and the insects loved it. And it had this lovely deep blue purple flower, very small flower, but very intense color. I think I may even dried a few of them. And then when we realized the roots it wasn't the right plant, and when we double checked, it was obvious it wasn't, because it was too high, and the roots, the hair, it wasn't hairy enough. But anyway, we kept it in the garden for at least another season at a slightly smaller scale. We kept 1 or 2 plants because they were so pretty, but they've all gone. They've all been taken out now. Yeah. But it's the class. Yes, exactly. But it's the classic story. These are plants that were all around the Mediterranean in great quantity, but they were so good as a dye plant, they've just been used. Mm-hmm. And I think it's grown in India commercially, and that's where most of the Dyer's alkanet root is sourced. So we've put a few words out to people who are sort of good botanists in that area around the Med, but we haven't found anything yet.
Well, the chap the Bonifacio, the chap who runs Growing Dye Plants Facebook page,
And the textile orchard.
He tells me that he has obtained one. He has obtained a plant.
If you're watching.
So I'm hoping eventually
Yeah.
he'll send me some seeds.
Yeah, I'm curious to know, just because you've been in the seed world for a while, and probably an early, maybe one of the only people or a few people selling dye seeds, at least in the UK, early on. And I'm curious to know just about the seed world, how that has evolved, how you've seen interest spark in different plants over the years. Obviously, there's been a big indigo boom and desirability to find seeds, and just where kind of seed patterns came from as far as accessibility, and sources. Can you?
I think that's really interesting question, and I think we're a very small scale producer, and the core plants are available from mainstream, big commercial providers, but I think we're probably the only people who you can go to for a lot of dye plants, really big range. And some plants were only available to buy as plants from quite obscure wildflower people, who now maybe are beginning to realize that more people are interested in them as dye plants, whereas before they were just a very obscure wildflower. So I'd like to think that as people have become aware of the sawwort, for example, and the bed straws, that the nurseries producing those plants have got a market now, a bigger market than they had before. I think there's a lot of fashion involved, and I think which is no bad thing because it's all great inspiration and creativity. But I'm thinking of the botanical dyers who, particularly love certain types of plants. I mean, the Cosmos sulphureus, which is so packed with color, but also the leaves are such a beautiful shape. So if you want to do contact printing, that's a really gorgeous leaf to work with. I think that brings things in, and we are Ashley and I are, well, downshifting is the word we use, which means we live a very, very low impact, low consumption life on a very low income. So we don't really get involved in following what's currently trendy at all. We don't have a telly, so we don't watch the television. And we don't go out and buy gardening magazines. And so we're kind of blissfully unaware really of what's currently trending usually.
But there is an increase in the interest in dye plants. About a year ago, I think one of the big gardening TV programs, Gardener's World,
probably 2 years ago.
Yeah, I think it was 2 years ago. They actually featured dye plants and growing dye plants on, and they got a lot of details wrong, but nevertheless, they had a go.
Right. And we're definitely, because of the fibre shed movement, getting stronger and stronger in the UK, which is so exciting. Albeit that the UK is so small, we could almost be the size of one American fibre shed. But the fibre shed movement is getting into some very exciting places, and lots of fashion entrepreneurs really want to be able to source at scale. And I think that we're at a really creative moment where there are lots of pioneers who are going to be redoing the work that Ian Howard did with Woad in Norfolk, and really breaking through to another level here, which I don't think we have large. I mean, the outside dyers are amazing; they produce a lot of wonderful stuff, but not at farm scale. No. So I think it will happen. And I think there's a lot of projects probably that are going to go around several loops of trying and failing and modifying and keeping trying again. So and you've been able to have enough seed to help some of the fibre sheds out when they need a bit extra seed. So we tried to help a few people out, and
I've advertised the fact that I've got a surplus amount of seed this year. So, but so far no takers.
Well, you've had a few people nibble, but
Yeah.
but we also do a lot of really lovely work with because of Ashley's background in horticultural therapy. We've really had a lot of delight in helping community gardens that work with different people with special needs to be able to include dye gardening in their activities, and that's just endlessly rewarding, because you just know that you're helping develop activities that are really therapeutic for people, that are really meaningful and developmental. So yeah, we always, any community gardens out there that have got charitable projects, come and talk to us if you need a discount on seeds. You know, that's the way we always work. So
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's such a wonderful, I feel like especially indigo, I don't know if you find this, but are some plants more communal than others? Like there's those communal moments with madder, right? The madder dig, and Japanese indigo especially, there's something so tactile and accessible and instantaneous about it. It seems so to lend itself to teaching in those environments. Yeah.
Yeah, especially when you're working with a fresh leaf and
Mhm.
using the salt rub method or the kind of ice method with the blended leaves. It's so easy. Anybody can make that happen for folks with so
Yeah.
little, you know,
And
technology
this
in the way.
horticulture therapy in combination with really color therapy, you know, there's so much there.
Yeah.
That's so wonderful. I want that program here. I do feel like that is a lot of what probably all gardening is, and every gardener can attest to that, that feeling of well-being in the garden, right?
Oh yes,
Yes,
definitely.
so it's exciting to see it used more really intentionally in therapy.
It's because I used to work in as a horticultural therapist. It's not particularly easy thing to do with people, to coordinate your growing with with their projects. So it is often a bit tricky. It's a bit tricky, you know. It's a logistical challenge. Yes, yeah. But once you actually get there and actually do something, it's wonderful, you know. Everybody enjoys themselves so much. So yeah.
And if you have a
go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, if you have a big crop, you know, as you say, it's that thing about getting everybody in to help pick, and everybody goes home with blue fingernails for the next week, and you've all been part of something. Quite rewarding.
Yeah, and when you're, I think there's something very, very bonding about those experiences. That it has been for me as well. And sharing more community things like that. You know, it was probably really commonplace for us to have those types of community harvesting activities, you know, several hundred years ago, but it seems like now there are less and less opportunities for that. And I feel like color, particularly indigo, really gives people an opportunity to do something together outside.
Well, and it's so great that, you know, we've completely, it's like the history, the tragic and exploitative and appalling history of the, you know, trading, the slave labor, the whole history of indigo, and it would have been just as appalling to work on the woad farms in the UK.
I'm sure.
It feels like we're starting again here from the bottom up at small scale, and empowering people to make their own color and to treasure the textiles that they make from them as an alternative way of relating to textiles. So you treasure, you know, Ashley will be wearing this jumper till it falls to pieces, and those objects they have more meaning and more value, don't they, for longer. So I'd love to know a couple of things about woad. A lot of things about woad, but
maybe we can just start with the different types of woad that there are. And can you talk a little bit about, you're mentioning, you know, some of the history. I'm less familiar with the history around woad and how it was used locally, how it evolved, you know, what happened during the colonizing of color really and globally, and also your experiences with how you process it.
Oh, huge subject. That's a
Yeah.
whole other interview, Brittany.
Just all of it. Like that all.
I mean,
Well,
essentially, woad's Eurasian, so it was here before the tropical indigo started to get traded in. So there's a fascinating kind of story about how the woad was accompanied by and then replaced by the tropical indigo. So the history of that is extremely interesting. In the UK, although a lot of madder was actually grown in Europe and imported into the UK, into England, woad was grown quite extensively.
Oh yeah. It was grown here, and it was grown by groups of people who moved around the country. I don't know what sort of a community they would have had, but they were quite separate to everybody else. They were traveling people. They moved around, and the reason they moved around so much is because you would grow one crop in a particular, you know, set of fields, and then you would have exhausted that land. It would have taken all the goodness out of it. So they then move on to another area, and so on. And of course, there's all these stories about the harvesters and how the woad was processed, and the fact that the people who did that job were shunned because the job was so smelly.
I think woad, being a member of the cabbage family, it's got very different plant chemistry in the leaves to your persicarias, and we notice whenever we do a cold extraction, whenever if you do solar dyeing with woad leaves, it's extraordinary, but the smell is really, really, really challenging when it's gone, you know, past a certain point.
When it started to ferment, yes, it's really, really smells.
And so
cabbage, right?
so there were ordinances. I mean, Queen Elizabeth I was reported to have had to stay somewhere within a woad processing plant area, you know, downwind of it or something, and the smell was so foul that she passed a law that said no woad growing will ever be allowed within so many miles of any royal property ever. It's just awful. I'm not experiencing that again. And all the dyeing works in any particular city or town were always in the direction, basically the direction that the wind blew the smells from the dyeing. That part of town would be the poor part of town that nobody would want to live in. So that was quite important, quite significant. But woad, I mean, woad was used in dyeing British police uniforms until quite well into the 20th century. So it wasn't completely replaced. It was it hung on by its teeth, really, didn't it, for a little bit? Yeah. But with the synthetic indigo and everything, the technique for reducing the woad fat, for actually extracting and processing the woad fat, was completely lost, and it was rediscovered by a man called John Edmonds. So this delightful little booklet, I don't know whether it's even still available, which I think was published by the Chiltern Open Air Museum. If anybody in the UK knows that, it's still there. He worked away at experimenting and rediscovering how to make it all work. And so everybody who's using woad now is incredibly indebted to John's work. I don't think he's alive anymore. So yeah, that was a lost set of skills that were reclaimed.
Yeah, I grew up in the south of France, also worked on it at about the same time. So the two areas, they both managed to produce indigo working indigo vats for the first time in the UK for donkey's years. Anyway, that was.
But we've
Oh,
we
George
grow.
says it is available, that pamphlet.
Oh, great, brilliant! Yeah,
Yeah.
it's really important. Really
Yeah,
important. The history of the history of woad and the medieval woad vat, and there have been some great books produced by Carolyn has done this research into the woad from
Woad to that.
Woad to this, yes,
yeah,
which
woad
was
to that.
from her local town, which isn't Stroud, but it's near. Terrible, can't remember it. So there's still a sort of a history to be told about woad production in the UK. I think we've been growing. We've been doing a dance with Chinese woad, haven't we? Do you want to talk about Chinese woad?
Well, I just said that as far as the processing of the woad here in medieval times, it's actually remarkably similar to what the Japanese do. The Japanese, they harvest the leaves, they dry them, and then they compost them. Whereas here with the woad, they would harvest the leaves, but then they'd crush them up into woad balls, dry them, and then dry them, and then they would compost them. But at the site of use, the actual woad balls themselves is what they would sell. That would be their commercial end product, and the people who wanted to buy with them would take the woad balls and then they would compost them to produce this indigo rich compost, which you would then use in the vats. So it's very similar, just slightly different to the Japanese. It's what's it called again?
The Sakuma.
The Sakuma, yeah, slightly different, but much the same. Yeah. Now,
do you want to talk about the Chinese woad?
Oh yeah, Chinese woad. Yes, it's a completely different plant. It's very different to European woad, and I still haven't got my head around it completely. It's definitely not adapted to our climate at all. It will flower. It will go to seed. It will go to flower in the first year. So it's much more like an annual than a biennial. But it does have about double the amount of indigo precursor in it as European woad. So everybody gets tempted by it here, and you think, oh, it's got twice as much. I'm going to grow it, but it's much more difficult to grow. You have to sow it in when it's very warm in the summer, and then harvest it quickly. Within about 2 months, you've got to harvest it. Otherwise it will just go to seed.
That's very short. Yeah.
Yeah.
So is it the same precursor chemical, the isotin, as woad?
I believe so. Yes. I'm not absolutely certain if the proportions are right. There's
isotin
A and isotin B. I'm not sure whether it has the same proportions, but yes, yeah.
And it would, I'm assuming, be native to China and other parts of Asia as well, too?
I don't know where else it's grown. I know it's mostly China, and it's in northern China, not in south. And there, I know that I looked it up. Where they grow it, their winter day length is about 2 hours longer than our winter day length here. But of course, they have colder winters. So the weather over there is very different to here. The seasonal patterns is very different. And I think that when you grow it here, it just gets confused by our climate.
On this coast of power, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So do you know if they're growing it, if in China, are artisans using it for dye still, or are they using it medicinally? I know that some woad roots.
As from what I've read, it's nearly all used medicinally.
Okay.
They use a little bit for dye things to dye, but I think that the practice of dyeing with it has ceased. and it's mostly the medicinal qualities that they want. Yeah.
We don't know that for sure, but that's what we think.
Well, I've read quite
you've
a bit,
tried
yeah,
researching
yeah.
it. We had one workshop that we ran using ordinary woad and Chinese woad, and we'd had a good crop, and one person in the group took on the responsibility for conditioning the Chinese woad vat, and she got such extraordinary results in this workshop from this vat that once we'd seen that, we're never going to give up trying to find the secret of getting a good crop from it reliably,
Yes.
because it was a beautiful blue and it was very, very concentrated. So we're going to keep working at that one.
Yeah.
Isatis glauca, we're not so sure about, are we?
Well, we've tried dyeing with it once, trying to extract the indigo from it once. The results were not particularly good. There's some indigo in there, but no, it seems like nowhere near as much as ordinary European woad.
But the advantage of this one is it's a perennial.
Yeah, it's perennial. Yeah.
How do you spell that one?
I'll put it in.
It's as I say, it's from Turkey, and from what I understand, from what I've read, there are quite a number of different Isatis species, quite a few different ones, because essentially that is where woad originated from, that area of the world, the Turkey and those sort of that sort of Middle East area, slightly to the north.
Yeah, it's so it's always fascinating. Every year there's like another plant that I get to learn about, that bubbles up from.
Well, the indigo world is so big, isn't it? I mean, and
huge,
so many different plants, they're so dissimilar to each other. We've got a little baptisia in the back garden, haven't we?
Not anymore. No? It died.
Did it?
Yeah.
Well, what else have we got in the garden that you're growing that I keep frowning at that you think might be blue? Thing with the pink flowers. No?
Oh, that's an indigofera. I've got a non-indigo producing indigofera.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
There's a lot of those. Yeah.
Again, there's a lot. Yeah.
Susan wants to edit that one out of the patio. It's taking up a bit too much space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, the one I want to get hold of is Indigofera australis.
Oh,
so if anybody out there has got any seeds, I'd love to have some, because I believe it is frost, at least a bit frost hardy. Yes.
Yeah. I need that one too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. We just had John Walker on a couple of weeks ago, and he's been finding a lot of Indigofera fruticosa, which was introduced to the island, and it has established itself well in little stands. And I hear just here and there about the australis. It seems to be a smaller plant, perhaps, than the other indigo bearing varieties, and I'd love to learn more. So yes, anyone here who has more information about that plant, we'd love to just learn about it. It is really wonderful just to meet the plant, if nothing else,
Yes.
Not necessarily from the viewpoint of I'm going to get a big batch of dye from it. It's just nice to see it and meet it. Had the same experience with the Indigofera fruticosa. It just got about yay high, and then it just, when the sun disappeared, it just kind of it was unhappy. So I got to meet it, and that was it. So woad and the different processes of it are really interesting. The woad balls and what you're saying about composting. I actually didn't realize that was the additional component to woad ball. And are people still, I know it's very labor intensive, right? To make that, and I'm sure that's evolved over the years of just how to make the ball itself, right?
I think I'm making a rustling noise because I've got a little one here. I don't know if you can see it.
They had
Susanna's done it in Cornwall.
Yeah,
Susanna Mitchell's done it.
Commercially, they put all the woad onto the ground or into a little trench, and they had a mill a mill, and the horse would go round and round in circles with a big
Stone.
millstone,
Mhm.
which would crush the leaves, and then you just then take the crushed leaves and make them into balls. And
Okay.
I've no doubt that all the workers there had hands which
Permanent
were
blue hands.
completely
Yeah.
blue. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think there's quite a loss of indigo in the making of the ball. There's a lot of yield loss in making it, but you can store it, and that's that was the value. You could store it and then trade it.
Right. And sell it. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. So it's the capturing. It's the same with making indigo pigment or block. We don't sell any of our indigo product because there isn't enough of it. So we keep all of ours in the form of a sludge, and we let it settle, and then we bale off the top and put it into a smaller container. But we don't really do very much down to powder.
No.
But the woad sludges absolutely smell appalling. I mean, I don't know whether you've got time for another anecdote, but we have a friend who we now know really well, and she actually runs the community garden that we use for our workshops. But she moved to the house 2 doors along from us several years ago, and she had her parents visiting, and they were really, really excited. Oh, this is your new house, it's lovely, but what is that terrible smell? There's clearly a dreadful problem with the drains. And I don't think Liz knew at the time that's what we were doing, but she found out afterwards that just on about 2 or 3 days in the summer, we will do something on the back patio that involves releasing an evil smell. So she did then clarify to her parents that no, it wasn't a systemic problem with the drains in the area. It's Susan and Ashley. So we do have to be careful. Yeah. But Suzanne, I'll give a call out to Susanna Mitchell, who's down in Cornwall. And she's got a lovely little studio practice, and she did a lot of work making woad balls not long ago, and I think she put some films on Instagram, I think. So it's worth looking her up on social media.
I will. Okay. Excellent. Yeah, that's interesting, just to see how well our access to not just energy but storage has evolved, and the ideas around how we buy something is not necessarily the ideal way to use something, right? I think this is a big thing to grapple with when we talk about indigo powders, especially because that is the way most of us are introduced to the plant, is through the extract, right, through the pigment. And then just to learn that, well, that's shelf stable and it weighs less and it's easier to ship, but it may not, be the best way we can access the pigment if we're not selling it, right?
Yeah.
So it's easy. It's interesting to see this shift away from the powder, especially as more and more people are doing even just a pot or 3 or 4 a bed in their backyard, right?
Definitely.
Yeah. We've noticed since we started growing madder and using fresh madder, and we began to realize that the dried madder didn't necessarily produce as much alizarin, as much red dye as the fresh stuff. The fresh stuff seemed to produce more.
Well, not weight by weight, but after you've adjusted for the reduction of water, after you've allowed the thing to.
The dried madder root weighs a sixth
roughly
of the fresh root.
Okay.
So that would kind of imply that you would need to use 6 times as much fresh root to dye something, but in fact you don't. You don't need to use as much. So we reckon that because everybody got used to using just the dried product, and that was the one that was sold, that was the one that was transported around the world,
right?
That it's just
fallen out of practice, and there's no reason not to use it fresh. You might get slightly different balance of dyes because the oxidation hasn't happened, but it is a really interesting thing that if you're just doing it in your own backyard for your own immediate use, you can do things that other people couldn't. So it's fun.
yeah, I feel like we're rediscovering all of those things. Just like the indigo-bearing, right? It's not usually sold. It's not an extract that's sold, at least for dyers' purposes. Although I do hear about it being used medicinally, but it's not something that's readily available, right? You can't go buy indigo-bearing.
No.
But if you are growing the plants, both woad and persicaria, in my experience, have readily given those colors, and at different stages and in different ways, lots of different ways to get there. Yeah, how have your indigo-bearing experiments been? What have you kind of discovered through your own practice?
Oh, it's a real mystery when we first started
Yes.
to discover it happening, and we weren't really talking to anybody else about it, but we were having a lot of kind of guesswork about what might be causing it. So you set a woad vat, and maybe it would be near the end of it wasn't properly reduced, or you'd leave it overnight, or you'd forget to take something out of the dye pot, and you go back to it the next morning and take it out and get this wonderful surprise, because it might be purple, it might be pink, it might be we had one piece of silk that came out this wonderful mottled gray, turquoise and purple.
Oh wow.
And that was really just by neglect, really, an accident. And then gradually you try and see if you can. I think we realized that overheating did help.
Yes.
But I mean, it's really all credit to Louisa that she's now put into the public domain. Louisa Uribe is such a helpful clarification of how to get to that purple directly, because we were getting to it as a side effect or a byproduct of losing concentration on what we were doing with the vats. But got some lovely colors, and I mean, it's not color fast into bright sunlight for a very long time. With our friend Brian, who I've mentioned a couple of times, we dyed some wool skeins in that color for him, and he made a lovely hat with gray natural colored fleece and the purple and a bit of blue, and the bit that was purple on the top of his head, in his woolly hat all winter, is faded, but the inside of the hat still got the secret purple in it.
Have you had any luck getting it onto cellulose, or you don't do much cellulose work?
Well, we do actually. Ashley's quite.
We do a bit. We do a bit.
We haven't, I would say. No.
Not really. No, we've not had a lot of luck getting onto cellulose at all.
Same. Yeah, it's just been the silk. I feel like it has a real affinity to silk, and maybe even for some reason possibly more light fastness. I've left my silks out in the sun at every event, and it's really hanging on brilliantly.
That's
good.
That's
amazing. I wasn't expecting it to be very light fast as well.
Yes.
Either.
Yes. It's certainly better. It's certainly more light fast than most people, make out.
Yeah, I think so. And even, in comparison to, say, logwood,
yes,
I would say it's stronger.
There's your purple rabbit that you needle felted that's still purple.
Oh yes. I did. I dyed some fleece and made
a sculpture,
an animal,
strange purple rabbit,
and remarkable. You would expect if it started out purple or lilac, you would expect the indigo-bearing to fade first,
and it would go blue.
But in fact, the opposite happened. The blue bit faded, and it went to pink. So I still haven't figured out, what was going on there at all. So, yes.
Have you noticed a difference in the, there's the really purple indigo-bearing and the pink indigo-bearing? I have only done one experiment with woad, so I don't have a lot of. It was just the wild woad that we had here, and it gave me pink just instantly. It was like heat up the woad and you get pink.
Yes.
And I've never really got pink much from the Japanese indigo. It was the more heating it and getting the purples. And I'm wondering if you know anything about that, and kind of the changes that happen from pink to purples, or.
Yeah, I don't know, but I can say that our experiences are much the same. The woad is much more likely to produce the indigo-bearing than the Japanese indigo. And we have tried with Japanese indigo a few times, but we have not been very successful. We haven't got a really good
Deep colour, no.
good lilac at all. You know,
But
I
the
do
word
think it's
seemed
less of a concentration, or it's more of a concentration thing where my best opportunities with the indie Reuben have been when I'm doing a big extraction, in 100-gallon stock tank. So I've got a lot of indoxyl rich liquid that's waiting to be converted, and I can either go indigo tin or I can go indie Reuben with heating it. And it does seem like the more you have available, I think when they do percentages, testing with Stony Creek Colors, they'll tell you, it does have some indie Reuben in it, but in comparison to the indigo tin, it's like 2 or 4%, to 40 or 30, 50, whatever. So it feels like almost that it is always there, but it's just in this very, very small amount. So the more liquid you have, it would seem that the higher chances you're gonna get to put something in the pot and heat it and get those purples, right?
Still loads of work to be done there.
Yeah. I'm so curious about indie Reuben. It feels like the next horizon, the next frontier for some indigo experiments here.
I was going to say, you mentioned that we don't do much cellulose, but actually Ashley's got a lot of excitement about cellulose, going back to his graphic design roots, really. So as we've gone on, we've moved from wool onto fabric for various reasons, because as I said, my mum's sort of background with fabric. I've got I did a course in quilting, so I'm moving more towards fabric-based work. But Ash was really interested in trying to do prints with resist. So he did a workshop with a lovely guy called Rob Jones at Rowmore Designs in London, and he's using the Katagami stenciling technique. And we don't ever seem to have time to sit down and really do more on that. But you've got lots of designs, lots of ideas.
Is that the rice-based resist then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Which, getting the ingredients is a bit tricky in this country, but there's always Maiwa. So
And was this a stencil that you created or someone created?
Yeah, you created that stencil, didn't you, Ash? And you've designed quite a lot.
The story behind the lobster, I need to know.
Oh.
It's
It's a kumon.
Or is it a crawfish?
No, see, scary creatures.
Okay.
These
are not the best.
That's things. Another one. They're all based on trilobites or various other crustaceans.
Okay. Cool.
Your geology days.
Yeah, but I just like the shapes. I like the shapes a lot.
What you need to know is Ashley's also been very interested in science fiction and fantasy illustration, and he's done some illustration himself. So alien monsters are a great source of focus for you, and these are sort of tweaks on that. Some of them look more scary than others to me. Some of them look geological, some of them look alien.
But these crustaceans, they make fantastic graphic images.
They do, yeah.
It takes a while. I mean, it would take me several hours to actually do the design, usually for any particular one, and then of course, if you're making a stencil, you take another several hours to make a stencil.
Yeah, it's so symmetrical. I'm looking at it right above your shoulder, and it's really incredibly symmetrical. So,
It's a very traditional Japanese clan approach of these sort of symbols, these clan symbols. I think they're called kumon. So they are always bilaterally symmetric and a circular, and they have incredible power. They're very, very powerful graphically. So you've been playing with that within those constraints, haven't you?
Yes, yeah. So that's the only sort of artistic thing that I do now with particularly with the indigo. These are just cross stitch. They're cross stitch.
I love those. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah.
So there might one day be an actual cotton textile quilt. If I get Ashley to do enough of these.
Coming on here. Yeah.
There might be a real quilt. Yeah.
Great. Excellent. Well, this is lovely. Anything else that you, I feel like we could go on forever, but somebody is asking, what is Ash using to cut the stencil from? So are you using the traditional Japanese paper?
Actually, yes, I did. Yes. The what's it?
Persimmon
Persimmon paper.
Persimmon.
Yeah.
Okay.
I managed to get hold of some. Not so easy.
Yeah.
In fact,
I think but you can buy it from My Work, but
My
getting
Work,
it in the
My
UK
Work.
is a bit more difficult. But
Yeah.
it's fantastic. It means your stencil will last. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But
Yes.
you can use other things.
And
Yes,
so
absolutely.
when you say bilaterally, does that mean you're really only cutting out one half when you're cutting the actual stencil, and then or
No,
you're folding it?
Yeah, you have to cut the whole thing out.
Or I meant folded. Is it?
Yeah.
Is it? Being
Yeah,
cut?
no, it's not folded. It's not folded.
Oh, okay.
Because the persimmon paper is quite thick,
Okay.
and if you were to fold it, you'd probably damage it.
Mm.
So it has to be done, with a cutting mat and a really good blade.
And a good
Yeah.
ruler. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
What kind of blade are you using? Like an X-Acto knife blade or a specific
You
type?
were using just a surgical scalpel at one point, but we've got something called a swivel knife.
It's
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
A swivel knife.
It's got a very tiny blade, which will rotate. So you can do curves. You can do
Like a
curves
pen
with it
would.
nice and
Yeah.
easily.
Mhm.
Yeah.
The ball.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Brilliant. And so
I was
that's
just
yeah. Go ahead.
So I was just going to mention one thing, because Ashley said to me, "Oh, you should get some of your textile work out, Susan," because I don't do very much, and I haven't done a huge amount in plant dye. But I wanted to give a shout out to a lady called Jane Meredith, who is based in the Herefordshire countryside and has a wonderful practice on the banks of the River Wye. We went there for a 2 or 3 day workshop on a mud resist printing, and
We love mud resist.
oh, it's just fantastic. So we were taught a simple mud resist recipe, and then we were allowed to play with designs for 3 days. Really, it felt like 3 days. It might have only been 2, but it felt like 3 days. And I'd never done anything like that in my life. And she was so encouraging and so inspiring that I just felt really, really, really encouraged. I did all sorts of designs. I did a river with buildings, and I don't know, I did lots and lots and lots of stuff. She'd had some blocks she'd prepared, but then there was some just using your fingers to make prints, and it was just the most wonderful thing. And I got such lovely feedback and encouragement when I thought I couldn't do any of this. That's what allowed me to go on and do a textile course, patchwork and quilting, which involved drawing and design. So I do think there's people run these courses and they don't often appreciate what they set off in motion, and how important those experiences are when they're really well facilitated. And yeah, Jane, I think, has a Steiner teaching background, and when we look back now, we can see that weekend was important for us. Yeah.
I love that you mentioned the space you were given to play after you learned the technique. I think that's really so critical and so wonderful when there's that space allowed. I'm very inspired by that as someone who loves to teach and share, and really creating more of that space in those workshop environments. Like more isn't always more, like really giving people a chance to do what you just learned is really the best way for them to absorb it, right? And then go home and do it again, right? That sounds wonderful as an experience. I wish every time I hear about these workshops, I wish I could go to all of them. Speaking of, are you doing any workshops this year?
We are, yes, we are. Not as many as perhaps we would like, but because we've just really started up again.
Slowly after the COVID gap, really, of doing in-person workshops. But Well, we've got a Woad Day in midsummer. That's now fully booked. But if anybody wants to go on a waiting list, we've got, so on the website there's a section on the website with the workshops on it.
Yes. Okay.
We're doing a Japanese Indigo Day, which I think is Sunday the 17th of July, and there's definitely places on that one. And if anybody's interested in designing a dye garden, we have a sort of a day course. Well, we've got one next Sunday, but there's another one at the beginning of April, and we will be running both the Indigo, the Woad, and the design courses probably again in the autumn. We'll be running something in Devon with our friend Brian and Richard on garden design in August, but that's not on the website. That will probably be advertised locally in Devon. And then sometimes we do a 2-day Madder workshop, don't we? And sometimes a Mordanting workshop. Depends on demand, really. But yeah, for sure, we're doing Japanese Indigo. It will be with fresh leaves on the 17th of July in Hitchin. Yeah.
Excellent. Well, I would definitely post those again, the workshop links.
Thank you.
Anyone who's local. I wish I could come to that as well. This has been just really wonderful. Thank you both for sharing just your stories and experiences, and for always being so generous in the group. I'm really appreciative. You know, I like to say I learned everything I know from this group, because it's true. and really just the generosity of other people who are growing in their backyards who shared with me, and you're one of them. So yeah, thanks again. And please do share, you know, any upcoming things, plop them into the group. Definitely share a picture of that wonderful tapestry. Thanks for sharing that huge labor of love. Wow. You know, not just 6 years of you making it, but the growing in addition to all of that is an added.
And the funny thing is, Brittany, Ashley swore at the very beginning when I learned to spin that he was never going to learn to spin, and he's hand spun all of the yarn, you know. So it's we end up getting taken to places, don't we, by our dyes that we maybe would never have done before.
This is so true. Yeah.
And can we just say jointly as well a huge thank you to you, because you know what you've created with the group, and is really valuable.
It's exceptionally good. It's absolutely fantastic. You know, you've managed to pull together so much and basically educated the entire world. It's really good.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I'm so appreciative to hear all these stories, and I'll treasure them. I hope that, you know, this becomes a real like catalog, a treasury of stories for folks to look back on, and hopefully it's just so common that everybody knows, you know, these stories about indigo. That's the real goal, is that people don't ask you what is indigo anymore. You know, it's just so popular. Maybe you could end with you know, what's a future vision that you have for indigo, if you could envision the best possible future for, you know, natural. We'll open up to all natural dyes, not just indigo, but you have any?
Well, I think we would like to see, you know, what the fiber shed people would like, and like to see it the growing of dye plants reintroduced, and on a medium level scale, you know, not a huge scale, but a medium level scale, that would allow people to work in you know, growing and producing indigo, like Ian Howard started it. I would love to see somebody carry on in the UK, you know, as well as other places. But
and with that deep respect for the soil and the land and the landscape and the biodiversity, you know, so that we have textiles that we know have been produced gently and lightly on the earth, you know, to the extent that the indigo does need a lot of fertilization, but let's think really creatively about how we can do that. I mean, you were talking about creative edges and new things like Indirubium, but I'm going to say that urine has got a huge amount of potential, and nobody's really looked into making the most of that from a fertilizer point of view. So I think we just have to have that huge respect.
And dyeing too, right? The sig
absolutely beautiful for wool. So
that is on my list. Have you guys done one of those?
We've done a little experimentation, but our friend Brian has done more. But the lady you need to speak to is Helen Melvin,
Oh,
who
yes,
in
Helen.
the UK. Helen has written about the Sigvat in her wonderful book. So, but it's I'm sure we have to learn how to fertilize the land in more intelligent ways. So
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh, excellent. Well, thank you again. I'll just double check in the group that I didn't miss any questions, but this was wonderful to see you, hear you, and learn more about your intimate experiences with color. And we're excited to follow along with you this year and whatever you discover next.
brilliant.
Okay.
Thank
Well,
you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah.
It's been absolutely great, Brittany.
Yeah.
Well, thanks to everyone watching as well and commenting. Thank you for being here and part of this community. And we'll see you again there's a couple more episodes. We'll end in March for the season of Blue Biographies. As if you're here in the Northern Hemisphere, like me, I'm getting ready to start my seeds the end of March. So I'll be indisposed in the garden. But thanks to everyone who's shared these Blue Bios with us this season, and we'll see you next time, everyone. Thank you. Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.